and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast by movie nerds for movie nerds, where we attempt to elevate some of the movies that may need a little more love in the world. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, your host, and we have a treat for you today. This is going to be our first dramatic podcast. Last time we delved into Top Secret, one of my all-time favorite comedies, and this time we're going to be mixing it up a little bit. And we'll be talking about a very, very controversial / misunderstood / very complex drama from 2004 called The Village. And to help me on this journey, I'm going to bring along my friends here. Let's see. Our guest today, he is a writer, a producer. What else are you? A jackass, general malcontent?
Yeah, I think
smart
that's
aleck. Yeah. Okay, my friend, this is Brian Scully. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Mario. This is going to be an interesting one because The Village has been a movie I've loved since I saw it in theaters when it was first released, and I have been fighting opinion about it ever since.
Oh yeah. Trust me, this is one. There's going to be a lot of listenership for this one because there's almost no one who's seen The Village and doesn't have a very strong opinion of it one way or another.
Yeah, it's there are certain movies that are just born to be divisive, and an M. Night Shyamalan movie will be divisive regardless in one way or another, but this one was where it really started creating like chasms of division, because after this he did Lady in the Water, and God knows that is a very, very bad movie and badly regarded movie. This was sort of like, for some people, the bridge to him doing that, and also they were sort of riding a wave. I'm just jumping right in.
Yeah,
they were riding a wave of believing that they believed he was a one-trick pony because The Sixth Sense happened to have a twist. Mm-hmm. And so they inserted that filter over everything he did since. And so Unbreakable, they saw it through the filter of The Sixth Sense. Signs, they saw it through the filter of The Sixth Sense. And The Village is where it really hurt the most, because this is... I mean, so I'll let you start with the topic, but oh my God, there's just so much I want to say about what I truly believe and will go to bat for as one of the best movies last decade, unquestionably.
Excellent. Okay, let's give people a little backstory in case they're not familiar, because I'd mentioned we were talking about this movie, and I had a lot of people saying, "Oh, I've never heard of that. What is that?" So let's give a little backstory. I will leave it to you. You seem to be the Shyamalan expert. And am I pronouncing his name correctly? Is that Shyamalan?
Shyamalan.
Okay. So why don't you give us a little history on how M. Night Shyamalan became famous and how we arrived here at The Village?
So M. Night Shyamalan started his career with a couple of very small movies. Praying with Anger was a very autobiographical movie about growing up as an Indian American. Wide Awake is a movie with Rosie O'Donnell, and it's very kind of Sixth Sense-y in some respects, where it deals with death and the church and just sort of what comes after and how do you grapple with that. And it was with The Sixth Sense, which was a spec that he sold to Disney, that it really all exploded for him. And it's because the script is absolutely amazing, and that's why he got such a huge fee for it. I think it was like $2.5 million. Mm-hmm. And it's because of that obviously he's now on the genre train that he is. But he started off with just very small, personal, quiet character drama / comedy pieces. Like they're not supernatural, they're not fantastical by any stretch of the imagination. And so The Sixth Sense was his first time doing genre, and of course that's what became his bread and butter. And as a result, Unbreakable had a fantastical element. It's his origin story for a comic book hero in so many ways. And after that, you have Signs, where it's alien. It's about faith and it's about family loss and grief, but it's also about aliens. Mm-hmm. And then we get to The Village, and The Village, out of his popular fare, is the only movie he ever did before he got to The Visit, where there are no monsters, there is nothing supernatural, there is nothing that is fantastical or otherworldly about this movie. It is only about people and how people are in fact the monsters. Mm-hmm. And because of his reputation, The Village obviously was sold as a horror movie, very much in the same vein of Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and Signs. which it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I will stand by that. The Village is not a horror movie. It is very much a melancholy, gothic-ish, in certain ways, romance with thriller elements at
Mm-hmm.
times. And people didn't know what the hell to make of that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because that's not who M. Night Shyamalan is. And so Disney didn't know how to sell it to an audience. The audiences didn't know what they were getting. They walked into the movie thinking that it was going to be one thing. It was something completely different. To this day, I will say that is why the opinions of this movie are as strongly divisive as they are. Because
Yeah.
people went into it wanting something that it wasn't going to give them. And they are just not happy with that. They wanted what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You said you would argue strongly that it's not a horror movie. I don't think it's even close to a horror movie. I mean, I understand why it was marketed that way at the time, but it's like, it's an injustice to even hint that this is a horror movie.
Yeah, there are two moments total where anything even vaguely horrific. I wouldn't even go that far to use that word, but if you really want to stretch it, vaguely horrific. And that's when Ivy is in the woods, and when those who don't speak of are in the village, and Ivy is waiting for Lucius to see if he'll come back. That's it.
Okay.
Otherwise, this movie it doesn't come close to it. And so, dear God, people just did not know what they were getting.
It's more sad than anything. And again, I've watched it a lot over the last couple months, and it just strikes me what a sad movie it is.
Yeah, it is. When I say melancholy, I really mean it. It is a study in grief and in fear, and it embraces those two things like a very large warm blanket, and it just explores that nonstop. It does not explore shocking you or frightening you. It has no interest in that.
Okay, so I'm just going to give people the M. Night Shyamalan for Dummies here, the short version, just in case they didn't understand what you were talking about in some of those things. Yeah, so Sixth Sense, massive hit, huge hit. He's well known for it. I don't think we'd ever talk about it on the show because it's like universally beloved movie. And then, Unbreakable, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I don't dislike it. I know a lot of people love that movie. That would be a fun one to talk about maybe one day. Also a fairly big hit. Signs, fairly divisive, but still a big hit. And then The Village, which absolutely turned some people off to the point that I was just reading Roger Ebert's review of it this morning, and he was like offended that this movie was made. He was so pissed, like he was just visibly angry at this movie.
I think he called it a colossal misfire, and I think that his interpretation can be described just as such. I think he's another example of it didn't occur to him that he went into it with an expectation that was not ever going to be met, and he didn't know what to do with that. It's almost like it angers me to read some of those reviews like that.
Yeah, and this is a theme you're going to run into that I know a lot of people, Brian's one, obviously I have another friend, Justin, that they liked the Village maybe the first time they saw it, and then the second time you saw it, you really liked it, and the third time you really like it, you just absolutely love it the more and more you watch it. Do you find that true in your case as well?
Absolutely. The Village is a movie that I have rewatched very constantly ever since I got the DVD the instant it came out, and I had been rewatching it for like 5 or 6 times in the past couple of days just to get ready for this. I think I tweeted this. It is still just as sublime to me as it was 14 years ago, and I'm still finding little details, little nuances, and choices that are made. The world building is just so perfect. The character work and the choices that are made are so pitch perfect. Unbreakable is my favorite Shyamalan movie, and The Sixth Sense is genius, but in a way that I respect it more than I love it, if that makes any sense. But to me, The Village is the one that I connect to the most. And I absolutely fall more in love with it as time goes on.
Now, did you fall in love with it the first time? Again, because I'm just reminding people, Brian is a screenwriter. He does this for a living. So he may look at a script, a story a little differently than maybe the average layman would. Like, did this movie call to you the first time you saw it? It's aged. It called to me, yes, but it's definitely aged very well for me. As a younger person, I think I was like 21 when it came out, and I
I connected with it in very specific ways, and as life went on and as the tragedies of life happened, as they do, the movie takes a much stronger significance, and the way it plays those themes, and the way it lets the heart of a character explore this kind of idea of isolationism, to run from your fear, to run from your tragedy. But as August Nicholson says, you may run from sorrow as we have. Sorrow will find you. It can smell you. Like, that is something that you feel so much more profoundly as you get older, just because you lose more. You see people lose more. The world hurts more. And how it goes through its journey in the movie connects so much more strongly as a result. So yeah, I would say that as a younger person, loved it for what it was in many ways, but it's something you just don't really appreciate until you've faced a little bit of what this movie faces. At least that's what I would argue.
Yeah. And I would say, see, my history with this movie is, I'd seen all his movies, and I love The Sixth Sense. Unbreakable, I liked it more now. I didn't maybe at the time. Signs, I thought was cool. And I remember seeing The Village. And again, the pushback against it, the fallout was just immediate. Like, people just loved it or hated it. So polarizing right off the bat. And my wife and I saw it on DVD right after it came out. And there's a big elephant in the room here that we haven't mentioned, the fact that there's a huge twist in this movie. But I will say we watched it for the first time. I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm sorry,
it's not. I would argue it's not a twist at all. It's the first movie he does where there's absolutely no twist whatsoever.
Excellent.
I will get to that later, though. Please continue.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to make that exact same argument. That is not really a twist. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So we get to this big twist that everyone's talking about, and I'm like, oh, that was kind of cool. And I didn't really think it was great. I didn't think it was bad. It was just kind of neat. Okay, it was a neat way of reevaluating the movie when you get to the end. And I just kind of filed this movie away. I'm like, okay, that was pretty good. Like, I don't understand why people were so visibly angry at this movie. Like, it doesn't really take shortcuts. It was weird, the hatred for it. And so I'm sure we'll get into what the hate was really at. But anyway, it came back. I started doing a website about 10 years later called Movies That Deserve More Love. And I rented The Village, thinking, oh, I would like to build this one up a little bit. I'm thinking, it wasn't horrible. That's going to be my argument. It's not bad. Come on, people, it's not horrible. And I watched it, and I was just blown away with how good it is when you know the story and then watch it a second time.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a freaking masterpiece. And so I watched it again and again, and I'm like, every time I watch it, it's better. And I'm like, this is a movie. There's no better candidate for this podcast than The Village that really, really, really needs kind of real evaluation out there.
100% agree, and that's why I'm glad to be here to help you with that, because I'm tired of fighting this battle by myself.
Yeah, it's funny when I announce what kind of movies I'm doing for this podcast, people are always saying, oh, I'd like to do that one. Oh, I'd like to be the co-host. The Village, I had a line of like 12 people. Like, it's people are lining up to do this. Wow. It's funny, yeah. It's like, I don't think there are that many people that hate it anymore. It's one of those things, I think maybe people have started to come around on it. I don't know, but it just is my sense that I don't really know as it's hated as much as it once was. The criticism that I tend to hear nowadays is, oh, I guessed the ending, as if that kind of cancels out the whole movie. Well, it's like, I could guess the ending of a Rocky movie and it's still a good movie. I mean,
amazingly enough, the Titanic sinking does not preclude you from being swept up in the previous 3.5 hours of the story. Yeah. So sometimes, yes, you get where it's going, and that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it isn't to blindside you with a left turn 5 minutes before you walk out the door. Sometimes the purpose of that story is to take you on a specific journey, which is the point of The Village. It's all about the journey of these characters, the way that they have run. Their journey is to retreat, and how that retreat has damaged them.
All right. I'm just there again. There's a huge elephant in the room, in that the only thing people want to talk about with The Village is this aka quote unquote twist, which we're both going to argue isn't even a twist at all, because it's hinted at well into the movie, and it's just a certain way of looking at the storyline, really. But anyway, I'm going to try to do the best I can to describe this plot to people who've never seen the movie before without giving away any specific spoiler details. You think it's possible to do that?
I mean, it's possible, but are we really going to try to dodge discussing the end?
Of course not. No,
then why admit this? Just give it all. Give it all.
All right. Okay, we will if you are concerned about spoilers, I will give you a little quick summary, just a recap. We'll do that, a little recap of what the story is and what the controversy is. And then I will specifically say in the podcast, spoilers from here on out, and then we get to the good stuff. You think that's fair?
I think that's fair, and I also would suggest that people should watch this movie as soon as freaking possible so they can truly appreciate what we're even talking about, because this is a movie that needs to be experienced to even make any sense of the next 45 plus minutes.
Okay, so herein is the storyline of The Village as near as I can remember it. I'm sometimes bad with going over the entire plot, but there's this little, it's almost like an Amish village, you would say. It's like a little collection of people that kind of live under a certain code. It's kind of old-timey. They kind of have the old-timey language and customs and stuff. They're all farmers. And what's the name of it again? Covington Woods? It's like this little community?
Covington, yeah, they call it Covington.
Okay, yeah, it's Covington. And it's really in this little meadow, and they formed a little township, and it's almost like an old-timey Amish village, and there is a cluster of woods around them, and basically this is their life. They live there, they farm, they go to church. It's just very simple, pious life, with the one asterisk being there's woods around us and there's monsters in it. Don't go in there. And this is beaten into the kids' heads over and over from the day they are born. Do not cross those woods. Do not leave these woods. There's monsters there. They will eat you. It's only safe in here. We're good so far?
Yeah, we're right on point. And that there is a truce. The elders tell the children that there is a truce between these creatures. What they tell the children are called those we don't speak of, which grammatically infuriates me, but I go with it. And between them and the villagers. And so as long as they do not cross the border into the woods, the creatures will not cross the border into the village. And that is the peace that has been maintained throughout its whole existence. And so the children simply know this is life.
Okay, good. So this is the story of the village elder, played by William Hurt. His name is Mr. Walker. Do we know his first name, or is he just Mr. Walker?
Oh, Lord. The word Albert is what comes to mind, but I'm very possibly wrong. And I'm too lazy to Google it right now.
Okay. So Mr. Walker, and he has, two daughters? He's got Kitty, the eldest daughter, played by Judy Greer, which is hilarious if you know Arrested Development, and she also plays the kitty name on that show. So anyway, it's
the last time you'll be seeing these.
Yes. I'm going to use that as the stinger at the end of this. Kitty is his eldest daughter, and then Ivy is his youngest daughter, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is daughter in real life of Ron Howard. So he has the two daughters, and it's basically the story of his youngest daughter, Ivy, that she's blind. Again, she's played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and she really does a fantastic job in this movie. It's one of these things that even people that hate this movie will admit, well, she was pretty good in it.
Yes. She is easily the standout of the standout cast.
Okay, so basically, the short version of the story is Ivy's going to fall in love with this young handyman named Lucius, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, and it's really going to be the story of their love and how it sets into motion a lot of things, and both good and some very bad, and then a decision that must be made at the end of the movie, which will unravel the entire point of this village being here. It's very complex. I'm trying not to give away any specific details. Brian, please jump in. Is there something you think that the novice should know before they watch this movie?
No, I think I think if you're trying to avoid telegraphing anything outright, that's as succinct as you can make it. Other than to say that the village is born out of grief. It's something that the elders have not been shy to tell the next generation that they're raising, their own children, that they are there to remove themselves from the towns and the outside world, because that is where the violence happens. That is where death and misery and crime, immorality have always taken place. And they refuse to let their children be victim to it as well. Yeah. And that's just born into them, that outside of those woods, into those towns, beyond those borders, is where hell is. And we refuse to let this become hell.
Yeah. And the one thing I can add here is that how the story is kind of driven here, like these people have been living here for, they never say in the movie, I'm assuming it's about 20 years because that's how young some of these kids are, how old some of these kids are.
Yeah, roughly 20, 25-ish
years. 25 years. And the problem that's facing the village is that children are dying. They're getting infections. They're dying of simple diseases that could be cured. And it's becoming an issue with some of the other people, like, well, why don't we just go into the towns and we can get the medicines? and the medicines would maybe cure us, and because we don't have those here. And so this is becoming the moral dilemma. Should there be someone to go out and venture and get some of the medicines and come back and help the village, or should they just stay out of this hellish existence on the other side of the woods? So this is what's going to drive the entire story here.
Absolutely. And I feel like if we said anything more, we would have to hit the spoiler alert.
Okay, here we go. This is where we officially hit the spoiler alert. So if you've never seen The Village, turn this off right now. All 6 or 7 of my listeners, just turn this off and go watch The Village, rent it, whatever. Make up your mind what you think of it. Then come back, and now we're going to get to the good stuff. As Michael Bolton's saying, now back to the good part.
Mm-hmm. So now that we have alerted our nice and diverse and large listening base, feel free, Mr. Lanza, to get into the good stuff.
Okay, what would be the ideal way to do this? Should we just summarize why this village was created, or should we walk through the story beat by beat and explain how it's crafted? What do you think would be a more rich viewing experience for people?
I feel like we don't need to walk through beat by beat. I feel like because we're going to get into all those beats, I think, pretty organically, just to go right for the gut. What ultimately happens is that through personal, not conflicts, but jealousies and very human things that happen between people when they don't get what they want. Lucius is critically injured, and Ivy demands that she be allowed to go into the towns and cross through the woods to get the medicine that he needs, because, as she says, if he dies, all that is left of me will die with him. And her father knows that he cannot stop her, because Ivy is extremely strong. She is fiercely independent, and she believes in the conquering of good, and she believes in hope, which is something that, though the elders have discussed, that they're there for hope to flourish, they repress it with fear. And so he knows he can't do that with Ivy. And so he confesses to Ivy that the creatures do not exist, and that those we don't speak of are the elders. Yes. They have maid suits. They take turns in the village on occasion by penetrating the borders and scaring the population so that they remain in fear of what's outside. Thus, they want to stay inside. And once he tells that to Ivy, Ivy knows, so going to town is really just a simple matter of walking there. Great. I'm skipping several beats with a couple of guides that go with her and certain other things that happen. But when she does get outside the border of the woods, we see that a park ranger in a Jeep is nearby, sees her hopping over a fence, and asks her, "You are not allowed in there. What are you doing?" And we see that it is not the late 19th century, as we were led to believe, quote, as we were led to believe, but modern day, present day, and the medicines that they need are the syringes and the penicillin, other drugs to calm down Lucius' fever and stop the infection from spreading, et cetera, et cetera. And as Ivy returns and the villagers have to make a choice, do we continue to maintain our facade, or do we hope that we can survive past this, and should we confess to those others around us? And they vote to keep the facade. They vote to keep the secret, even though Ivy, the strongest person in this village of its new generation, knows everything. You know, it has a both happy, satisfying ending that the people who are supposed to survive are going to survive, but it's still very melancholy, and it's still very disquieting how, in so many ways, the people who have known the best continue to do the worst and double down on their choice.
I want to give people kind of a big picture overview here, because I don't want to lose people, because I know exactly we're both going to be saying the same thing. But what I want to do is, I think it would be more helpful to, let's talk about what happened to the townspeople before they created the village, why they created the village. I think this is really, really important to kind of understand the resonance of this movie and how sad this movie is.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all of these elders met at a crisis counseling center.
Yes,
because they're all people whose families were murdered and violated
robbed and their bodies left in dumpsters for dead.
Yeah.
And the thing is that these stories are stories the elders tell the children very openly. They just happen to change a couple of specific nouns, such as when Sigourney Weaver, Lucius's mother, talks about how Lucius's father left to go to the market. Not the supermarket, but just the market at a specific time of day. And he was left in an alley, naked and robbed and murdered, instead of the dumpster that he was actually found in. So all of these people came together because the world broke them. The world of crime, the world of human indecency, and just how human beings are the monsters against themselves. And so William Hurt's character, Mr. Walker, happened to be a man of wealthy means, as someone who has inherited a family fortune, and was also a history professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and proposes using that money, that family fortune, to run away from the world. All of these people to escape what the world is.
Yeah,
Even
and
though, again, as August Nicholson says, you may run from sorrow as we have, sorrow will find you. I love that line.
That's a great line. There's so many good quotes here. Yeah. Again, that's the part that I think people don't remember. They'll guess the twist. Oh, this movie's set in modern times. That's the twist. Ha ha, I outsmarted the movie. But like, it's much deeper than that. And that's the thing that I think people don't remember unless they've seen this movie, this is the response to pain. Every single one of these people has had someone in their life murdered, taken away from them, raped, killed. They've all suffered horrible tragedies, and they met in a crisis counseling group. And then this one rich guy, Mr. Walker, said, basically, I mean, it's not unlike we went and formed a cult. Let's go out and live like Charles Manson, go live in the caves, and this will be our world, and no one can intrude on us. So it was a very unhealthy way to approach grief, but at the same time, a very normal way. This is what people tend to do when they have massive grief in their life. You lose a child, you lose a parent, a spouse. You don't want to feel grief again. You want to protect yourself. You want to insulate, and it's a psychological thing. And so that's the thing. They basically arrested development. Like, I hate to make another kiddie joke, but but yeah, they are not going to experience grief again, and they've run away from the world. They've gone out here into this park reserve, which Mr. Walker is revealed later comes from a very rich family, and we are going to set up a commune. We're living in like a little commune. We're going to have kids, and it's going to be a perfect little environment, and we're going to raise them, and they will never have to feel the pain, the loss, the grief that we had to feel. And it's just really a horrible thing they've done to these kids in the long run.
It absolutely is. And it's also so short-sighted that they fail to recognize, even though it's directly in their faces, it's a thing that they have lived every day, that the pain that they are feeling comes from human beings, beings inflicting this upon others. And so by leaving to escape with other human beings, you are escaping with the problem. You cannot run from that problem. And it's because of that blindness that is built only off of the kind of profound grief that comes when, I think as Sigourney Weaver says, you lose the irreplaceable. You don't make rational choices. This is a deeply irrational choice that Mr. Walker makes. But these people have felt no other recourse. That inconsolable grief commanded them. And it's something that occurred to me actually only today, is that this movie was written just after 9/11. He was shooting Signs. The first day of Signs was on 9/11, and so they had to push one day, and so they started the shoot of Signs with a memorial, and so he was writing this at the time, and the idea of that being such an influence on this, to me, helps unlock so much of what is being said. Because it's the idea of sealing off your borders, of protecting not just your homeland, but also the idea of a home. It just permeates this movie. It's all about the isolationism and the perpetuation of the fear of the other. And what that does not just to a community, but to a person searching for their own way beyond what they know, and how that traps you and how that stumps you, and what that does to these children, and how this generation may or may not be able to fight past that, which we see with Ivy and also with Lucius. They are starting to, which scares the elders. And of course you're scared by what what you've run from, what you've been hiding from as much as you can. They don't want that to happen to their children, but how can you avoid it? It's already happening. It happens in the village. These children are dying. These people are being murdered. People are being attacked. As we get to Adrian Brody's character, which is why Lucius is incapacitated in the first place. He's stabbed almost to death. So it's, yeah, I mean, I could go on for a lot longer, but I'll stop myself now.
One of my friends, Justin, who is a big fan of The Village like you, he's written me a lot of notes. He wanted me to bring these up in the podcast. And one thing he likes to point out is you have to realize that all the elders came from a world where they were like college professors. They were all academics and things like that. And he says basically it's kind of a commentary on academia and that all these people are not really doers, they're thinkers. And they've been so racked by grief that they don't have maybe the healthy response to the grief response. Like, again, I'm not old enough to have lost a child, so I can't really say what that's like. But it's like it's got to be one of the most horrific things ever. And Justin pointed out, he's like, even just listen to the dialogue that the characters use. They're like, it's like excessive. They've created this old English-like dialogue, and it's really just to run away from the world. They're running away. They're all thinkers. They think this is a way they can escape their pain. And it's just such a depressing story when you think about the bigger picture of this movie.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. Like, as just talking about how they speak. Yes, everyone here has arcane, awkward, very studied, very artificially mannered ways of speaking. And for a lot of people, they recoiled from that because, like, oh, it sounds so unnatural. Oh, it's so pretentious. No, people who complain about that miss the point. It is supposed to sound awkward and mannered and studied and arcane and clumsy because they are pretenders. As William Hurt says, it is farce. This is theater. It just happens to be theater in which they're living. And of course they don't know how to talk properly in this particular era because they're not from it. Yes, when you study the history, you can only study it. You didn't live it. You don't know it the way those people did. And so, yes, it's very removed in certain ways academically like that. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that they don't live this. It's like, again, if you don't, they're just pretending. It's all play acting. And again, they're not doing it for malicious reasons. And you really have to think about the bigger picture of the story. These are parents with kids, and they think they are doing right by their kids. It's not like, I will say, when I was a kid, I was at summer camp in 6th grade, and the counselors thought it would be funny to put on a show that there was a murderer running out in the woods with an axe, and we should all hide in the cabins. And that was playing a prank on the kids. And it scared me crapless. But that's not what's going on in the village. They think they're doing right.
Yep.
We are protecting our kids, and it's not unlike these, parents nowadays. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, and, parents are beaten over the head. Oh, there's all these scary things in the world. Your kid's going to be kidnapped, going to be killed, blah, 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 school shooters and stuff. But in reality, the crime rate right now in the world is about the lowest it's ever been. Like, it's really, this is about the safest time ever in the history of America or in the world. And it's funny that so many parents, so many parents still live with their kids in a bubble nowadays. They put them in bubble wrap. Oh, we can't let them go outside. Oh, we can't do this. And again, you think you're doing right by your kids. You're protecting them, but you're not, because you're isolating them. They'll never have to experience anything. And again, how you live, how you grow as a person is you have to experience pain and loss. You must do that to really lead a full life. If you don't, you never really, there's certain levels of maturity you never get to if you never have to experience loss. So it's one of these things, these parents think they're doing right by their kids, but they're not. They're absolutely stunting them. And again, another thing that my friend Justin pointed out is that every single bad thing that goes on in this movie, in the village, and just in general, is caused because the parents have shunned progress.
Yes.
There's no medicine. The kid Noah is like retarded. I don't know what exactly his issue is, but he's got mental issues that may have been helped with medicine or counseling or something. Ivy is blind. That may have been helped with medicine or something when she was young. Everything bad in this village is caused because the parents have put these kids in a bubble that's not natural. It's totally not the real world, but these kids eventually are going to get to the age when they start running into the same issues that the parents had. There's a murder, there's jealousy, there's greed. And that's the thing, that's the parents, I don't know if they didn't know or knew that they had a shelf life on this experiment. It was only going to last until the kids were old enough not to be idiots anymore. I mean, to
exactly.
put it bluntly. Yeah, so that's the thing, that every single bad thing that happens in this movie happens because the parents have screwed with these kids' lives. And as you said earlier, the parents are the monsters. There are indeed monsters in this movie. They are the parents, what they did to these poor kids.
And sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who don't know that they're monsters. They don't know that what they're doing is harmful. And to continue going on that point, yes, this is about not living life, but living the theater of life. And it's another reason why the movie telegraphs from the very first shot that this is fake. Where we see, like, the movie fades in from the credits and we see actual theater taking place of August Nicholson in front of his child's coffin. And you have 30, 40 people just standing back, almost like in rows, watching. And the camera zooms in on August Nicholson as if we're watching the performance take place. And it's not performance because he's lost his child. This is really a tragic moment for him. But it's the composition that tells us subliminally that what we're seeing is in some way artificial. And for that to go from that shot to the tombstone that says 1890 to 1897 as the child's age, something doesn't feel right. And it's not supposed to, because the movie's telling us that while the grief is real, the world is not. And as we learn very quickly in the very next scene, it is born out of the horrific choices of these elders and how they have stunted the growth, how they have stunted progress. And yes, frankly, can we ask that? How did they not think that the shelf life of this was going to expire?
Yeah, I mean, I have a background in psychology, not really in counseling, but I have to believe that people who are under extreme duress, grief, don't think logically. They just want to wrap themselves in a little cocoon. I want the bad thing to go away. And there's not necessarily a long-term plan. You just want the hurt to go away. And I think that's the message of this movie, that it's all about hurt. Again, people think, oh, it's about a twist. It's about a time paradox where you're not in the time you think you are. No, it's not. This movie is about pain and loss. And it's really strong when you watch it the second and third time that the twist, again, quote unquote twist, is incidental to the movie. Like the movie, there's way more going on than just look what he did as a filmmaker here.
Absolutely. And to get into those layers, I mean, the movie's so tragic, as we know, but it's also so deeply romantic. It's also heart-wrenching in the most lovely ways. Like I still watch the porch scene between Lucius and Ivy. That's a single shot, just their two faces as they quietly, delicately communicate with each other in a way that they never have before. And I've shown just that scene to people before, and they have lost it. And then I tell them, so did you know that's from The Village? They said, no. The Village? Isn't that shitty movie? No, it's not. So you have this tragedy while Ivy saves Lucius in the end, and they'll go on and they'll live. That's a microcosmic victory, and then macrocosmically you have the tragedy of the elders faced with their dire consequences of their actions, and they choose to double down on them, which will only make things worse. And the cycle repeats, where they don't realize that they are about to create the harm to their own young that was done to them, just in a much more psychological way. It's running from pain, and how you don't realize that what you lost cannot be reclaimed, especially with a lie, and the weakness that brings in you. And oh God, I have so much I could say. I need to stop myself so you can leave.
Okay. Here we go. Yeah, I was noticing there's 3 scenes in this movie that I think are really powerful. And in fact, I would say there's about 10 or 12 that I think are good, really good. There's 3 that are absolute standouts. One of them is the one you said where Ivy and Lucius, finally fall in love on the porch. And they're,
and yes, I will dance with you on our wedding night. Oh, okay. My Lord.
Thank you, Brian.
My Lord.
Okay, yeah, no, it's yeah. For those who don't remember it, this is very fresh in our heads, so we're giving specific examples. But all the monsters, been this rumor that the monsters are running around the village, and Lucius is just sitting on Ivy's porch, and she's like, "Why are you sitting on my porch?" And he's like, "Well, there's monsters, and I need to make sure you're safe." Blah blah blah. And then she sits down. And what is the quote? You just quoted it, where she says, "I'd like to dance with someone on my wedding night," and he says, "Yes, I will dance on our wedding night." And that's when they finally admits that he loves her, and they have this really tender kiss. And the night pulls away with the camera. You don't actually see the kiss; you just kind of see it in silhouette. It's such a neat scene. I just love the way it's shot,
and it plays off of the character so well. In that Lucius is someone who's so. he's so reserved, he's so protective of himself, and he has no voice. The first time you see him, he doesn't know how to speak to his own mother without a piece of paper in front of him that has written down what he wants to say. He can't even say outright when he thinks he's done wrong to the village. He has to give a letter to someone else to read, and he can only sit there meekly as it's happening, and people's heads turn and face him. And this is the scene where he almost loses patience with both Ivy and himself as she tries to pry things out of him, as she tries to help him get to his voice, and then he gets it. And he states that I think the end of the speech is him saying that he feels no fear except for her, because it is her safety that he puts above all else. And it's for him to finally find his voice in that moment, for that barrier to drop. And barriers are a huge motif in the movie in so many ways. It's just glorious. It's such a great moment.
Yeah, I would say the dialogue in this movie really jumps out at me. And M. Night, I'm trying to think if he's really known for his dialogue. Like, The Sixth Sense, is there a lot of really good dialogue in that? Do you remember?
There is, but the thing is, the lines aren't quotable. Besides I See Dead People, obviously, is very quotable. But for instance, I could almost from memory quote you the entire car scene between Cole and his mother, where he finally admits his secret, and it's because the dialogue is so simple. It's so it's so clean, but yet so precisely emotional. And it's so clean and simple in that it lets the actors play with it on their own. He doesn't force them with profound moments of wordage. He just lets them breathe.
It's kind of like the opposite of Tarantino. Like Tarantino over the top with the dialogue. Night Shyamalan will go under the top, if that's a word, where he just lets the actors emote, basically.
He loves silence just as much as he loves a precise line. He loves a single static shot where the actors can simply exist and play and let the moment be what it is as your eyes tell the story for you. As opposed to, cut to this and we go to that close shot and we widen out for the two shot and then we do an over the shoulder. He's not interested whatsoever in anything other than letting the story dictate itself. And the dialogue is an extension of that.
Okay, so let's see. I had the first scene I mentioned, which is them on the porch kissing, and you mentioned that as well. It's funny, if you watch this movie, that scene will just jump out at you. It's so beautiful. Another one that struck me is there's a scene where where Joaquin Phoenix gets stabbed by his jealous rival Noah. He's collapsed in the cabin, and then Ivy is the one who finds him, and she is in grief. I mean, she wails, falls on him, and the rest of the village comes in and sees her crying over her dead fiance here. It's like, that is a powerful scene. That's one that really sticks with you when you watch the movie. Like, wow, I mean, that really wasn't so much even acting kind of when you watch it. That's Bryce Dallas Howard just wailing. There's so much emotion in this scene of grief and loss that it's almost tough to watch.
Yeah, wherever she's getting that, she's getting it from someplace very deep inside her. It's difficult. And what makes it even more harrowing to watch is that part of Ivy's story is that she may be blind, but she can see color, and she means by that the emotional color of someone, and that's something that she sort of teases Lucius with throughout the movie. Like, I won't tell you your color. Stop asking. It's flirty, but it's also very, very just genuinely sweet. And very peaceful, very, very serene. When Lucius is found by her, and you see her turn her face as her father comes up on the steps and encounters this bloody tableau, all she can eke out is, "Papa, I cannot see his color." And when you hear her say that, you know how dire this moment is, not just for him, but for her. This is something she has never faced before. Not just the tragedy, but just she's already felt a loss incomprehensible to her.
She's never been blind before, you could say.
Yes, and this is her first time she's truly blind, and it's terrifying, and it should be terrifying, and that's why that's a huge reason why it's so uncomfortable to watch that scene, not because it's bad, but because it's so strong. hurts to watch.
It does. The third scene I wanted to mention, and this is probably one I would guess you would name as well, the scene where Mr. Walker, where William Hurt has to go explain to the elders that he is allowing Ivy to go into town for the medicines.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they're all like, how could you do this? Like, we made an oath. We would never go into town. And again, they're hinting along in the movie that there's more going on here than just the village. That's why the argument is really isn't a twist. It's just kind of a different way of looking at the storyline.
Absolutely.
But, they're all saying, how dare you? We made an oath. And basically his response is, I said I would never go, but she never made an oath. And she's in love, and her husband's about to die, and she's about to face the same grief. And again, they don't show this in the movie, but you can wheel it out in your head. This is what he's telling them right here. This is where she's going to feel grief. So it's a really good speech from William Hurt. And again, he never set out to intentionally lie to his children to hurt them. He's never done anything wrong. He thinks everything he's done up until this point has been correct, the right way to protect your children, to bubble wrap them so they never have to go out into society and go and play with strangers or whatever. But yeah, and so here's the moment where he realizes, it smacks him like a 2x4 right between the eyes, that she is about to feel the exact same grief and loss that sent us here in the first place. And he does a really good job in this movie in general, as always, as any movie he's in. But this scene in particular, it's a real standout between some really good actors, I think.
Yeah, the cast is stellar. You have Cherry Jones, you have Sigourney Weaver, whose comment on the script was like, when I read this, I was having nightmares. And I feel like her nightmares are not because of the monsters. Her nightmares are because of the monsters of the humans. And you have Celia Weston and Brendan Gleeson and Jane Atkinson, Judy Greer, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard, William Hurt. It is a who's who of fine acting. And it's a kind of cast that M. Night Shyamalan never assembled before or since. And I think that's a particular note, to watch such nuanced and careful and smart choices being made by gifted, brilliant actors. It's a joy to watch, even if they were reading the phone book, frankly.
The one who really stood out to me when I watched, obviously there's Bryce Dallas Howard, but Joaquin Phoenix, I think it's a very understated role. It looks like it's a very simple role to play, but I was really impressed by just the way he reacts to things and how stoic he is. Would you agree with that in this movie?
Yes. It's, Joaquin Phoenix, after Signs, he went to this. And Signs, he wasn't by any means like a loudmouth, but he was definitely, more of a chatty and at times aggressive and jokey and jovial and confrontational even to Mel Gibson kind of guy. He's also someone who got to be the total jackass in Gladiator. And he was just about to do Walk the Line, or he's Johnny frickin' Cash. So he has an amazing range. But in this movie, yes, he is so terrified of his voice, of being on his own 2 feet and speaking his piece and being who he is, that it's all an internal process. And to do that is really hard. As an actor, to pull that off and make that look like a full world is happening internally and communicate that, it is very, very, very tricky. And any actor will tell you that. And for him to pull it off the way he does is incredible. It's mesmerizing.
Okay, the one thing that we've mentioned here earlier in this podcast, and a couple times in this podcast, is that we don't really consider there to be a twist in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you want to delve into that? Something I think people would be interested in hearing. Why do you not think there's a twist in The Village?
So to me, it kind of goes into it. Part of it is me being reactionary to people and to the marketing of M. Night Shyamalan, and this is something that had just been in my head playing out a few minutes ago, is that M. Night Shyamalan is just as much a product of marketing from the studio as he is a storyteller. And this is sort of like the last point before, at least in my opinion, before he sort of fell victim to his own success and fell victim to the studio system's idea of what he should be. Because The Sixth Sense has a twist. It's a genuine twist that you see coming a mile away once you know what it is, because every seed is planted. It is meticulous. It is exquisitely, precisely crafted throughout the movie, with every hint, with every seed planted. But Unbreakable doesn't really have that. To me, Unbreakable is not a twist ending because it is in your face the entire time as something the movie's telling you. You are opposites. You are this, David Dunn, as Elijah says, as Samuel L. Jackson says to Bruce Willis. You are this, and there is an opposite to you. By the way, you should be getting the hint that as someone who is unbreakable, and I am someone very breakable, I am your opposite, buddy. When the movie gets to that, no one should be shocked besides David Dunn when he sees the visions of what Elijah has done. The Signs doesn't have a twist. I don't consider water killing them as a twist. That's not a twist. That's something that's just played throughout the movie as obvious. And it's just something that it's all the dots are there and most of them are connected. It's just one little connection left that's made. To me, The Village is like that, where all of those dots are there. Most of them are connected for you. There's just one additional connection that happens, and it shouldn't surprise you, because like I said before, the movie goes out of its way from the very first moment to tell you that what you are seeing is fake, is a performance. And as you see the cracks in the elders widen, their emotional damage become more stated verbally and also just felt. You can see them sort of wrapped up and immersed in their own grief and sort of reliving the tragedies as things play out, because again, sorrow will find you.
Yes.
You are told outright, from the black boxes that you see to the ways you're told what's happened in life to how Ivy is treated, to how the elders whisper to each other in private. This is not real. No one should be surprised by this quote unquote twist. At least in the sense that you should know that it's wrong, that what you are seeing is phony. The fact that it's present day, okay, you may be like, okay, well, maybe, okay, it's not time travel, it's not this, it's not that, but you know it's fake. And so that's where I would say it's not a twist, and it's never been a twist.
Yeah, to me, I would just say the twist is that you're just looking at the story from the kid's point of view.
Yes.
Had you just looked at it from the parent's point of view, it's a totally different story. And I've always argued that would be a fascinating movie to watch this from the parent's point of view.
And thank you for saying it so much more succinctly than I could. Yes, that's actually exactly what it is. We see the perspective of the young generation first. And only in that moment where we are alone with the elders, as Ivy is reaching, quote unquote, the towns, do we get truly the elders' perspective, the old generation, the wounded generation.
Okay, here's a fun experiment. This is kind of the last thing I want to do. I don't want to go too much longer than an hour on these podcasts, but
sure.
I think it would be fun to, this is for your second time viewing. We're assuming you've already seen The Village once, the big reveal, whatever. Let's walk through the story from the point of view of the parents. I think this would completely change the way that people look at this story. And this is how I always wanted to end this podcast. The Village as seen by the parents of Covington. Okay, so here we go. I'll kind of start. Feel free to jump in. I'll
sure
in a second here. Where
I am on board with this. I have never done this thought experiment.
A bunch of professors in the Pennsylvania area, or academics, or otherwise, educated people, have suffered grief. So they formed this little commune. They've gone out to the woods. It was rented out by Mr. Walker, a very rich man. We learn early in the story that his father was quite rich. So there's some big-time money going on in the Walker family. He owns this preserve. He has rented it out. He has basically paid off the FAA or the local airports not to fly planes over it. So this, for all intents and purposes, is his world. He can create his own little commune. And they've been here for 20, 25 years, we established, and things have been going well. They lose a kid to an infection every now and then, I would say, but that's a price they've decided they're willing to pay. We can lose a kid every now and then, which, admittedly, since they're trying to run away from grief, they're already shooting themselves in the foot, but that's the price you pay.
Absolutely. To quote Hot Fuzz, it's for the greater good.
Yes. Okay, so 25 years in, and there's a troublemaker. There's two troublemakers in the village. One in particular is Lucius, Joaquin Phoenix, a very brave, stoic young man who is bothered by the fact that kids are apparently dropping dead left and right in this village, and no one's doing anything to help them. And this bothers him because he's a good kid and he's not stupid. He's like, why don't we do anything to help them? There's towns around here. Perhaps there's places that could help us that have medicines or something. So he's not an idiot, and he's kind of figured this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other troublemaker is Noah, who is the village idiot. He was kicked in the head by a horse or something. I don't know what was going on, but he's a troublemaker. But he loves to run out in the woods and play because he's an innocent young man who doesn't really grasp the bigger concept of the village. He's just a kid who wants to go play in the woods. Okay, so now here we go. The parents are troubled by this because Lucius is pushing very hard that why don't we stop all these kids dying in the village? And they're like, no, we can't. And Lucius is not going to take no for an answer. So now the parents have to up their game. For years, they've been playing this game. We have noises in the woods. We have fires. We run around in costume to scare the kids and keep them scared, just like when I was in 6th grade summer camp and they decided to give me a heart attack, my counselors. Mm-hmm. And now they have to up their game a little. So they're going to start upping the game as if what's the name I know you said? Those we don't speak of, yeah. We have to start upping the game as if they are coming into our village because we're pushing our luck. So they start skinning animals. They start leaving corpses around. And they're getting a little nervous, right? At this point, the parents are like, the game may be up pretty soon because these kids are starting to wise up to our facade.
Mm-hmm. And therefore, the slippery slope becomes ever more slippery.
Yes. So it's really all going to come to a head. So they're pushing and they're pushing and they're pushing, and the elders are doing raids now where the monsters are coming into the town, which again is just some elder they picked to run around and scare people. And these kids are scared crapless. So it's working, and the kids are retreating more and more into the village, and the parents have more and more control. And then, okay, what are the two things that really the straw breaks the camel's back here is that Lucius falls in love with Ivy. They finally decide that they're in love and they'd like to be married. And they learn that Noah has been running out into the woods, and apparently no monster's eating him in the woods. They got the village idiot out there running around willy-nilly picking berries. Nothing's bad happening to him. And the kids are starting to put two and two together, like maybe if you're pure of heart and you mean no harm, then the monsters won't hurt you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And here we go. So you look at this from the point of view of the parents, we're in some deep doo-doo here. They're going to figure this out real quick.
And what that produces in them is a very sinister approach to problem solving. If you want to call this a horror movie, that's your horror. The horror is that these parents only know how to double down to save themselves. They think they're protecting their own, but they are only protecting themselves.
Yep.
And when you have a child dead in a pit crying because he thought he was good enough to go into the woods. He thought he was good enough to do this, and he is now dead, and he's now going to be used as an excuse. He had an accident, and he's now a victim to the creatures that don't actually exist because we need an example for the children.
Yeah, you jumped a little far ahead, but yeah, that's where we're headed with this. That the parents' solution to help their kids is basically to terrify them even more.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and again, all this would probably work. It seems to work great. They get Lucius to fall in love with Ivy. He's kind of settled down. He doesn't want to leave so much because now he has a reason to stay. They've finally solved their problem. And now the true horror that they have created a society with jealousy. And that Noah, the village idiot, is in love with Ivy. He does not like that Ivy is hooked up with Lucius. And Noah, in his very simplistic way, decides the way to solve this problem is to stab Lucius in the stomach with a knife. And now we have what, they don't mention it in the movie, they don't specifically point it out, but I would have to think is the first crime in the history of Covington.
Yes, I believe it is. I would just say based on the context clues of their reaction and how the village handles it.
And so this is really where the movie jumps into the interesting part, that the elders now have to make a choice. We have done so much to these kids over the years. We have created a facade. They live in terror every day. Now one of our children is in danger of being killed in a murder situation. And again, he's not dead, but he's going to get an infection. It's going to kill him. Without a shadow of a doubt, they know it. At this point, do we break the facade or not? And the interesting thing is, the villagers say no. Mm-hmm. They are so invested in this lie. No, we're going to let Alice's son die. Lucius is going to die. I'm sorry, but that's the oath we took. We vowed never to go back. We're vowing we're staying away from pain. And that was, they pulled Mr. Walker aside and say, I'm sorry, you can't do it. You made an oath, same as we did. Ain't nobody helping this kid. And Mr. Walker, as one of the few heroes, he comes here at the end, he does a little face turn, and he's like, loophole, I can't do it, but I can send my daughter. She never took an oath. And again, this is the hero moment of the movie. He stands up against the monsters. He stands up against the elders. And he's like, she is going to go out there. She is going to discover the truth. Whether she wants to come back and continue this facade, if this life is worth living, it is up to Ivy. When she comes back, that will determine the future of the village. And really, that's the movie from the point of view of the parents, which I think is a fascinating story, and it's why I think the village is so much more interesting the second time you see it, because you can look at it through their eyes.
And see, before you started that, as I already said, I haven't done this thought experiment before. And when you go through it that way, it really is a remarkably different experience.
Yeah.
And very, very different and complex emotional through line for this movie. Oh my Lord, yeah, that's actually stunning. And actually, my question for you is that as they are, finding this resolve to, as Mr. Walker is finding his resolve to let Ivy go because Ivy didn't make the oath, so she's going to go. And he tells the elders, "No, I've made the choice. She gets to do it, and you can't stop her. I can't stop her. None of you can. What are you going to do? Kill her? Really? There's no other alternative, and so they're not going to do that. They're going to let her go." And the elders then, or at least Mr. Walker and his wife, then go back home, and we see what's inside these black boxes that each elder has in their home. And my question for you is, they open that black box. Mm-hmm. They look at the news clippings. They look at their mementos from when they were 25 years ago just about to come to Covington to build it. They have their keepsakes from the old world, as it were. Mm-hmm. Why do you think they open that box? To revisit that pain, to revisit that world that they left behind. Do you think it's because they're trying to steal their resolve? Like they're trying to remind themselves of this is what we're running from? Or do you think that in that moment they're not sure if they're getting ready to face what they've run from? What do you think it is?
I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer. My personal opinion is they know it's over. The jig is up. Our facade is done. We're going to be going back to the real world because there's no way that we'll be able to live here with one of us knowing that it's all fake, that we've lied to them all these years. I think they are slowly reminding themselves of what they're about to go back to.
I agree completely, and I think that that is the more viable interpretation, because when you see at the very last scene that Jesse Eisenberg's character says Ivy's returned from the town, she encountered a creature and killed it. That is and it's an unfortunate moment that he retreats with, but that's the moment Mr. Walker realizes that's our way out.
Yeah.
We can keep going with Noah as a sacrificial lamb. And that is doubly tragic. But I feel like that's a choice that was only made in that moment, and that before then, the elders did come to the conclusion that this is about to die.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Yes, excellent.
And it's funny because a lot of people, again, if you haven't seen this movie lately, you'll remember, the ending of the movie is we discover that Ivy's in modern times. And I'm like, that's a very simplistic way of remembering the ending. There's a lot more going on there because it's left very open-ended. She comes back to the village with her medicines. She saves Lucius. Mm-hmm. Is Ivy going to continue this facade? We don't know. And like you said, they even have an out, the elders, where Noah has been out in the woods. He's dead. We could say the monsters killed him. It will double down on our story. We can keep going. And it's left wide open, like, what's going to happen? And that's why this is one of those movies that is well open to a sequel. If they ever wanted to do it, it would be fantastic to see if you ever wanted to visit it again, because there's so much more going on there at the ending than most people remember.
There really is. But I would actually hate to see a sequel for this. I would hate to see a sequel because I feel like the end of this movie is exactly what it needs to be to conclude their story, because it leaves one question to a viewer's own interpretation. What does Ivy do?
Yeah.
What does Ivy say? What does Ivy keep secret? What does Ivy own to the others? Mm-hmm. Because one thing we forgot to mention is that her father tells her that there were legends. There were actually legends about those woods having creatures. In old-timey Pennsylvania legend, there are those stories. And so they used those stories as their inspiration for the creatures of those who we don't speak of. And Ivy remembers, as she's encountering the creature that's actually Noah in the suit, she remembers her father saying that, and so Ivy is not sure if that's real or not. So she is terrified. She is scared for her life that she is actually being attacked by something supernatural. So she knows that the elders fake it. She doesn't know that it is completely fake. But that's our first seed. And so where does that go in Ivy's mind? What does she discover after that? And I'm someone who would hate to see that answered definitively, because that would rob us of the ability to answer that ourselves. And I think The Village is an amazing example of a movie that does so much to plant the seeds in the viewers' hearts and let them run with them so that they can go on that journey, both with the elders and with the youth, as they're very different journeys. And you extract from that what you will about the themes of loss and grief and hope and the idea of what is your home? What do you run from? What do you run to? What do you build for yourself? What do you create for yourself? What is your world? These things are answered very differently, and Ivy's choice is kind of the bridge between the youthful choice and the elder choice. She now has that responsibility, and I love playing with that in my head. I would hate to see that answer definitively.
And what you could say in a sense that she is no longer a youth. She has become an elder.
Yes, she has. She has now been tasked with the knowledge. Yeah. And what do you do with it? So yeah. Oh God, I love this movie.
Okay, one more scene I wanted to talk about before we do a little wrap up here.
Sure.
There's a scene towards the end of the movie where Ivy's going through the woods, and of course this is the one they always hyped up in the promos, because like Brian said, this was billed as a horror movie 100% when it came out, where a monster is chasing her in the woods. It turns out that it's Noah. He falls in a pit, and she basically kills him. What's your interpretation of that scene? Is that Noah just playing hide and seek with her like he always does?
Yes.
Yeah.
In my mind, Noah is a character that unfortunately does not have any real growth. I mean, he does go on his own arc of jealousy. We see the affection and the love that he has for Ivy, and the jealousy that he has for Lucius commanding Ivy's attention. But beyond that, there's not much more to him, because unfortunately, there's just not much more to him. So to me, yes, he is playing hide and seek with her. He escapes with the suit, and who knows if he thinks it's fake or real or what it is, because he's Noah. But I think he's just playing a game with Ivy. He knows that Ivy's gone, and he wants to be with Ivy. He wants to find Ivy, because that's what they do. That's their life. That's all he's known. That's his comfort. And that's what kills him in the end.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I think people should really give this movie a second chance about. Like, there are no monsters. There's no real danger at any point in the movie. The only real danger is Noah stabbing Lucius. That's the one time anybody's ever in any danger in this movie, other than all the psychological damage that's being done to these kids. And then at the end, that's this horrible tragedy, is that one person does die, and it's Noah, and it was totally preventable. Like, he's just playing with Ivy. It's really all these lies and all this stuff that the parents have created, that there's monsters in the woods. That's why Noah dies. They kill Noah.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And I don't know, did you see this in the theater, or do you sell this on DVD first?
In DVD, never the theater.
Okay. So seeing this in the theater, there's a reason why there was a grand total of one gasp in the theater. And that gasp is when we go from Lucius turning around and saying there are different kinds of love, and he stops mid-sentence, and he has a confused look on his face. You cut to Adrian Brody's face, where Noah is looking down, and he looks up to Lucius's eyes, and he looks really confused himself, like he didn't quite know he was about to do what he just did. Lucius then looks down, and we see that Noah's wrist is right up against Lucius's body, and then he pulls his wrist back, and we see it is a knife that he just buried to the hilt into Lucius's chest. That was the one gasp of the movie. And it's because it is a human horror that takes place. Yeah. That is the only true horror moment of the movie, is when a human being inflicts violence upon the other. And the rest of the movie spooks you maybe at times. It has a creepy, unsettling vibe at times, but it's not horror, except for when we cause it against ourselves.
Exactly. In fact,
and hearing that gasp was great. because the sound also is pulled out from that moment in the movie. You only hear a slight sort of echo of wind passing through the house because the door is open. So you barely hear a breath from either of them. And when that knife comes out, it's a sensory moment unto itself. And so the audience's reaction is so much more, so much stronger than you would have if the music crashed or if there was a sudden thing here or whatever. It was played really well.
Yeah, and that's the one question I wanted to ask. What was the audience's reaction in the theater when you saw it to this movie? I'm very curious.
I remember my audience being sympathetic to the movie. I didn't have an audience that was talking back at the screen rudely or rolling their eyes or laughing at it or anything like that. Like the jokes were hitting in the right places and the creep factor was hitting in the right places. There were some people who I do remember crying when Lucius and Ivy had their porch scene, and the stabbing was the gasp. So so my experience seeing it in the theater was positive, and it only was afterwards that the blowback started becoming more noticeable publicly, where the reviews were really kicking in of, oh wait, people are really not responding to this well. And then I heard some friends after that, like the next weekend, oh my God, how did you like that? That piece of garbage wasn't scary at all. And I said it wasn't supposed to be. And they insisted it was because the trailer told them it was. Yeah. And I can't fight them on that because they're just going to dig in. So at least I got to have, and it's the same thing with the Blair Witch Project. I'm very grateful I had, for my first viewing of it in the theater, a very receptive, engaged audience on the journey of the movie, willing to buy what it was selling and committed to the story. So that definitely started me with a good taste.
Here's one question for you. This is probably my last question about The Village here. Do you think it is possible for a person to really understand, grasp, experience, and enjoy this movie on the level it was created for? Do you think that's possible on the first viewing, or does it take more than one viewing?
I really do think it merits at least two viewings to truly appreciate what it does, because no matter, I feel like this podcast is not going to help some people in breaking the idea of, no, it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It must be twisty. It must have something that I have to be watching out for, or this or that. And I have to start looking at all his little dots that he's connecting so I can see the puzzle pieces and, academically watching it. I feel like it's going to be hard for people on the first viewing to not do that. And once you've gotten that first viewing out of the way, you can go back and you can appreciate what it's doing for what it is. And that's the hardest thing to do for an M. Night Shyamalan movie, is to appreciate it for what it is, to let it be what it's telling you it wants to be, as opposed to what you think it should be. And so if you get it on the first viewing, great. Please still rewatch it, because you will then have a greater appreciation for the level of detail that it has, for the very meticulous plotting that it has, for the character work that it has, for even the tiniest bits of dialogue that are, it's so modulated, it's so well crafted on a second viewing that you can't exactly see on the first viewing. It should be seen twice. But if you love it the first time, I'm not going to fight you on that. Definitely not going to fight you on that.
Yeah, the artistry is really what jumps out at me on the second, third, fourth viewing. And I'm especially impressed by how little M. Night cheats in this movie just to make it twisty. He really doesn't. There's not one false moment in this movie where he intentionally misleads you or absolute just lies to you.
Absolutely no red herrings. Yeah.
There's one scene that's a little bit almost cheaty, and I was watching for it on this last viewing where, the monsters have been coming into town and been skinning livestock, and so the parents have upped the game, and now they're drawing marks on the doors and putting marks high up on the door to prove that it's not a coyote, that it's actually the monsters coming into town to come after people. And there's a scene with Sigourney Weaver and William Hurt where they're saying, well, the marks are higher. Coyotes couldn't go that high. And you think they're talking about, they're worried that monsters are coming to town, but on second viewing you realize they're not worried, they're plotting.
Exactly.
That's their plot. And that's the only time. Yeah. That's the only time M. Night comes even close to cheating in this movie. And it's very impressive when you look for it. It's something that only a very skilled screenwriter slash director could do. And again, you're a screenwriter. I'm preaching to the choir here. That's very tricky to do something like this and not cheat.
It's insanely difficult because the hardest thing to do is to deliver an idea or multiple ideas at the same time with the least amount of time spent and words spent to be able to say multiple things with a single sentence. That's misery trying to get right, because it's and then you have to do that for 90 to 120 minutes, give or take. And what you just said is a perfect example of how this movie does that so well. How it's able to deliver simultaneously a cheat, but also just a gloriously well-crafted hint as to what the psychology is of these elders, what these people have committed themselves to doing, and the kinds of damage psychologically they're willing to inflict in order to maintain a status quo, and how that they have become what they've rebelled against. And the fact that they don't realize that they are trapped in that cycle of humanity, how you become what you fear. It's so smart. It's absolutely one of his smartest scripts, and I'm so happy that slowly people are starting to come around to recognizing why it's so sharp.
Something you just said, this reminds me, I've brought up my friend Justin. I'm going to butcher his last name, Justin Lesniewski. I don't know how to pronounce that. But Justin has my all-time favorite quote when discussing The Village, and this will make you laugh, that I was talking about The Village a while back in a thread on Facebook, and someone said, "Oh, my wife nailed the ending. She guessed the ending to that in 5 minutes." And Justin responded, "Oh, really? She called that the elders were the actual monsters because they hated society, but ironically created the same problems they tried to run away from?" There's my rebuttal to anybody who said they guessed the ending and they hate this movie, to think that quote in mind.
That is a perfect concluding note, frankly. He is completely correct, and whoever says that they guessed the ending in 5 minutes is completely incorrect. No one guessed the ending to this movie. No one did. Not one person, and I will fight anyone who dares to try to argue otherwise.
Okay, before we sign off, I have one quote here I've circled. It's triple underlined in my notes. I have to end this, just as we've mentioned, the dialogue in this movie, the themes are so amazing. This is one of the greatest speeches I can think of in any of the movies we're going to talk about on this podcast, and it's right towards the end of the movie where Mr. Walker is explaining to the elders why his daughter is going to go into town and what this is going to mean. Do you know which monologue I'm about to read here?
Yes, I do, and I look forward to hearing it again.
Here we go. He says, "Let her go. If it ends, it ends. We can move towards hope. That's what's beautiful about this place. We cannot run from heartache. My brother was slain in the towns. The rest of my family died here. Heartache is a part of life. We know that now. Ivy is running toward hope. Let her run. If this place is worthy, she'll be successful in her quest." It's just so beautiful. And again, so much I love about this movie, and I just wish it got a second, third chance from people. And it's one of those things. I don't know if we'll make much of a difference on this podcast. I obviously share the same love that you do for The Village, but I would just love to hear some feedback from people that said, I listened to you guys, I watched it, and it was really a different movie the second time around. And that would just warm my heart if I were to hear something like that.
Honestly, if you're 4 listeners, as you joke, if even one person hears even a little bit of this episode, if not the whole thing, and is able to walk away reapproaching The Village and sees in it the quality craftsmanship that it has, I will consider this successful, because fighting people against The Village is like rolling the stone up the hill. It's so backbreakingly exhausting because you're fighting so many different perceptions that's all they are. They're perceptions of something that doesn't exist. And you can't convince them it doesn't exist until you put it in front of them to see, but they refuse to see it. So even one person being willing to see it for the first time with a fresher perspective will be a job well done, as far as I'm concerned, for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things, like, I just find this movie so beautiful and the storytelling so lovely. Just like, it's like people who hate it hate love. Like, come on, open your heart to this movie. It's so beautiful and just
okay,
sad.
Just calm down there.
Okay, sorry. I thought I was talking about Top Secret here for a second. Okay, we'll go back to The Village. Okay, well, I think that's about it. We've gone well over an hour. And again, I think we could have gone longer, but I just don't want to beat people over the head with it. We're going to just repeat stuff over and over. But have you got everything off your chest? Everything you wanted to get off?
Yeah. I mean, all of my notes are really just to remind me how much I love the movie. It's not necessarily notes for the podcast. No, I think we've definitely hit the right beats as far as making sure people realize why this movie is loaded with quality. And dear God, please give it another chance. Because it deserves your eyes, it deserves your ears, and it deserves your brain, and it deserves your heart, because it has a lot of heart to give.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate anybody who wants to come on the show and talk about especially a movie as divisive as this one. So I really appreciate you putting yourself on the line to open yourself to criticism here. Because, again, there's going to be people that listen to this and say, that movie sucks. What are they talking about?
And I look forward to their corrections to our opinions. No, thank you for letting me come on and defend a movie that is in dire need of good defense.
Excellent. That's what we're here for. And again, I just want to thank all our listeners for tuning in. Again, this is Staff Picks, where I have people on to talk about movies that are underrated, underloved, just need a little help, a little hug, movies that maybe need a little hug. So again, that's what you're going to get from this podcast. Again, my name is Mario Lanza. You can reach me. I have my email at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com. You can reach me on Twitter at Mario J. Lanza, or on Patreon. I have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Mario Lanza. And until the next time I talk to you, again, as Mario signing off, I will be sure to find another movie that people hate and try to get people to talk about it. That's my plan. And thank you for listening. I'll talk to you guys later. Goodbye.
Say goodbye to these.
Oh, no.
The last time you're going to be seeing these for a while.